Fog hung over the asphalt as Ray Dawson stepped out for his usual morning jog. The old forester was used to the quiet of the back roads of Pine Ridge, but what he saw at 5:47 a.m. on October 17th changed not only his life, but the entire town forever. "At first I thought it was some kind of trash on the road, you know?" Dawson said in a police interview, his voice still shaking hours after the discovery. "Then I saw a hand, just a hand on the asphalt, and I realized it was a person, or what was left of one." Maple Road, a forest road connecting Pine Ridge with neighboring East Haven, has rarely been used by locals since a new highway opened in 2018. Now it has become a crime scene. A double murder committed with extreme cruelty was the initial assessment of Detective Sarah Monroe, who arrived at the scene at 6:19 a.m. The victims were literally crushed by a heavy vehicle. Based on the nature of the injuries, we're looking at a truck, possibly a pickup with a reinforced frame. Detective Monroe, a 42-year-old woman with 15 years of experience in the Oregon police force, led the investigation. As the only experienced detective in the Pine Ridge Police Department, she had dealt with murders before, but never with such a degree of deliberate cruelty. "This was not an accident," Monroe said, studying the tire tracks on the asphalt. "The vehicle first ran over the victims, then backed up and ran over them again. We are dealing with a premeditated murder." By 8:30 a.m., County Medical Examiner Dr. Philip Hartman was able to preliminarily identify the victims from fragments of personal belongings and partial fingerprints. They were identified as 35-year-old Lauren Foster, a nurse at the local Pine Ridge Hospital, and 33-year-old Jason Carter, a physical education teacher at the town's high school. The news spread like wildfire throughout the town. Pine Ridge, with a population of only 12,000, had never been a place of violent crime. The last murder there had occurred 7 years earlier, when a drunken brawl at Frank's bar ended in a stabbing. "Lauren, she was the light of our hospital," said Melissa Harris, a senior nurse and close friend of the victim, holding back tears. "All the patients loved her. She always had time to listen, comfort, and support. I can't believe she's gone." By noon, police arrived at Foster and Sons Auto Repair on Main Street. Daniel Foster, Lauren's 38-year-old husband, was working on a customer's car when Detective Monroe asked him to come with her. "Mr. Foster looked shocked when he heard about his wife's death," Monroe recalls. But there was something strange about his reaction. He didn't ask how it happened. He didn't ask for details. He just sat down, covered his face with his hands, and was silent for almost a minute. Daniel Foster's first interview lasted 3 hours. He claimed he had spent the night at home waiting for his wife to return from her night shift. According to him, Lauren called around 11 p.m. to say she would be late because a difficult patient had been admitted to the hospital. That was the last time they spoke. "I fell asleep around 1 a.m., Foster said. "I thought she would come home when she finished her extra shift. It had happened before." However, a check of the hospital schedule showed that Lauren was not scheduled to work the night shift on October 16th. Melissa Harris confirmed that Lauren left the hospital at 5:30 p.m., saying she had personal plans for the evening. At the same time, Jason Carter's colleagues recalled that he had canceled his basketball team's practice scheduled for Tuesday evening, citing illness. Surveillance camera footage from a Shell gas station on the outskirts of town showed his car at 7:12 p.m. heading toward Maple Road. By the evening of the first day of the investigation, Detective Monroe had the first clues to solving the crime. Fragments of dark blue paint found at the scene, surveillance camera footage showing Jason's car heading toward the scene of the crime, and the victim's husband, whose testimony contained obvious inconsistencies. "We also found a second cell phone among Lauren's belongings," Monroe notes, "prepaid, unregistered. It had only one contact saved under the initials J.C. quote, and a long history of romantic messages." When the police arrived at the Fosters' home to investigate, neighbors had already gathered on the street. Many were crying, remembering Lauren as a kind and caring woman. "They seemed like the perfect couple," says Barbara Wilson, who has lived across the street from the Fosters for the past 8 years. Daniel was a hard worker, always helping everyone with their cars. Lauren was the life of the party, organizing all our neighborhood barbecues. Who could have wanted to hurt them? However, in the Fosters' garage, Detectives found a dark blue Ford F-150 pickup truck with a front bumper that looked recently cleaned, unlike the rest of the dirty vehicle. Traces of what could be blood were also found on the garage floor, although analysis was still pending. Detective Monroe returned to the police station with new questions. Why did Lauren lie to her husband about her whereabouts? Why did the gym teacher cancel practice and drive down a rarely used road? And most importantly, was Lauren's lie connected to Jason Carter? At the end of the first day of the investigation, Daniel Foster was taken to the police station for further questioning. This time, he was accompanied by his lawyer, Mark Jenkins. "My client is cooperating fully with the investigation," Jenkins said. "He is in shock over the loss of his wife and does not understand why he is the subject of suspicion." While looking into Daniel Foster's past, Detective Monroe found out that before opening his auto repair shop, he served in the Marine Corps, including 2 combat deployments in Afghanistan. Neighbors and friends described him as a quiet, reserved man who was totally devoted to his wife. "Daniel came back from the military a different man," said Ted Morrison, a childhood friend of Foster's and co-owner of a local hardware store. "Lauren helped him get back on his feet. They went through a lot together. I can't imagine him hurting her." That night, as the town of Pine Ridge tried to make sense of what had happened, detectives continued to gather evidence. Tire tracks at the crime scene, paint samples, the victim's cell phones, all of it could help uncover the truth about what really happened on Maple Road. The morning after the bodies were found, Pine Ridge was in shock. The school where Jason Carter worked flew the flag at half-mast. At the local hospital, Lauren's colleagues set up a makeshift memorial with photos, flowers, and notes. The windows of Daniel Foster's auto repair shop were blacked out, and a sign hung on the door reading, "Closed due to family circumstances." Detective Monroe began her day with a visit to the hospital. In the chief physician's office, she met Melissa Harris, the last person to see Lauren alive. "We worked together for almost 7 years," Melissa said, nervously fiddling with the bracelet on her wrist. "Lauren was special. She listened to patients like no one else could. She always stayed late if someone needed support." "When did you notice a change in her behavior?" Monroe asked, looking through Lauren's visit records for the past few months. Melissa hesitated. "Maybe 3 months ago? She started checking her phone more often, sometimes smiling at messages. She left early a few times. I thought maybe she and Daniel were getting back together or something." "Did she ever mention Jason Carter?" "Not directly, but there was one moment. We had a company party in early September. Lauren was drinking more than usual and said something like, 'Sometimes life gives you a second chance to feel alive.' Now I realize what she might have meant." Monroe recorded the statement and requested access to Lauren's work schedule. It turned out that over the past 2 months, Lauren had allegedly stayed late at work 11 times, although she was not officially scheduled for overtime. At the same time, Officer Jackson interviewed Jason Carter's colleagues at Pine Ridge High School. School principal Ellen McKenzie described Carter as an energetic, dedicated professional. "Jason joined us just a year and a half ago, but the kids loved him," the principal said. "He completely revamped the athletic program, and our basketball team made it to the district finals for the first time in 10 years. I can't believe he's gone." When Jackson asked if she had noticed anything unusual about Carter's behavior, the principal hesitated. "Nothing specific, but a couple of times I saw him talking to a woman in a car in the parking lot after school. I didn't see her face, but the car was a silver Toyota Camry. Lauren Foster had one just like it." A check of the records confirmed that Lauren did indeed own a silver 2018 Toyota Camry. By noon, the state crime lab released its initial findings. Tire tracks at the crime scene matched the tires on Foster's pickup truck. Samples of blue paint also matched the color of his car. Analysis of stains in the garage confirmed the presence of blood matching Lauren's blood type. Daniel Foster was arrested at 2:35 p.m. at his lawyer's home. He refused to make a statement without Jenkins present. "We understand the seriousness of the situation," his lawyer told reporters gathered at the police station. "But my client is innocent. We have evidence to support his alibi." Foster's alibi was linked to a security camera at a 24-hour store in nearby East Haven. where he allegedly bought cigarettes at 11:47 p.m., around the time of the crime, according to the medical examiner's preliminary assessment. Detective Monroe wasn't convinced. The man in the footage looks like Foster, but his face is partially obscured by a cap. Plus, it only takes 15 minutes to get from East Haven to Maple Road. The murder could have happened after midnight. Meanwhile, a search of the Fosters' home revealed new details about their family life. At first glance, everything looked perfect. A neat house, family photos on the walls, trips together, a smiling couple. But in Lauren's dresser drawer, detectives found a folder with bank statements showing that their business was in financial trouble. Daniel's auto repair shop owed suppliers nearly $78,000. In Lauren's personal laptop, detectives found a history of searching for apartments for rent in Portland and information about job openings at medical facilities there. The last search query was made the day before her death. Jason Carter lived in a modest apartment in an apartment building on the outskirts of Pine Ridge. A search revealed a neat, almost Spartan dwelling. The only unusual find was a locked box under the bed containing a stack of letters from someone named Rebecca M. with a Seattle postmark, a photo of Jason with a young woman and a baby, and hospital records from Seattle Central Hospital dated 2 years earlier. It looks like Mr. Carter had a secret life before he moved to Pine Ridge, Monroe noted as she looked through the documents. In the afternoon, the detectives conducted a series of interviews with the Fosters' friends and neighbors. Gradually, a more complex picture of their relationship emerged than it had seemed at first glance. "Lauren often came over for coffee when Daniel was working late," said neighbor Judy Pierce. "Several times I saw bruises on her wrists. When I asked, she said she'd hurt herself at work, but now I wonder..." Daniel's colleague at the auto repair shop, Rick Sumner, had a different point of view. Dan always spoke so proudly about his wife. "My Lauren is an angel," he would say. After he got back from the army, he was quick to anger, but never with people. The worst he ever did was kick a tire or throw a tool. By the evening of the second day of the investigation, Detective Monroe had pieced together a rough timeline of the night's events. 5:30 p.m., Lauren leaves the hospital, telling Melissa she has personal plans. 7:12 p.m., Jason's car is caught on camera at a gas station on the way to Maple Road. 7:45 p.m., approximately, Lauren's silver Camry is seen driving in the same direction, confirmed by a nearby farm resident. 11 p.m., Lauren calls her husband, saying she's running late at work. 11:47 p.m., a man resembling Daniel buys cigarettes in East Haven. 12:15 to 1:30 a.m. estimated, time of the murder according to the forensic report. "Something doesn't add up here," Monroe said to her partner, Officer Jackson. If Foster was really in East Haven at 11:47 p.m., he would have barely had time to drive to Maple Road, commit the murder, and return home by the time the neighbors saw the light in his bedroom at around 1:15 a.m. The distance is too great. "Unless," Jackson began. "Unless he had an accomplice," Monroe finished. "Or it wasn't him on the tape." At 10 p.m., the station received a call from Melissa Harris. The nurse's voice sounded agitated. "Detective Monroe, I just remembered something important. Last month, Lauren and I were working the night shift. She got a message and looked upset. I asked if everything was okay, and she said that Daniel had started seeing a therapist at the Veterans Center again. She said, 'He goes so far into his head that I'm afraid one day he won't be able to come back.'" Monroe thanked her for the information and immediately sent a request to the Veterans Support Center. Responding to a call after hours, the center's director confirmed that Daniel Foster was indeed attending sessions for post-traumatic stress disorder he had developed while serving. His therapist, Dr. Liam Warren, described Daniel as a man struggling with inner demons but striving for healing. "There is one disturbing incident in our records," the director added. "About a month ago, Daniel had a breakdown during group therapy. He was shouting about betrayal and that she's destroying everything I've worked for. We had to call security to calm him down." By the end of the second day of the investigation, the image of Daniel Foster was becoming increasingly contradictory. On the one hand, he was a devoted husband, a respected businessman, and a veteran. On the other, he was a man struggling with PTSD, financial problems, and possibly suspecting his wife of infidelity. However, the main turning point of the day came with the analysis of Jason Carter's cell phone data. Technical experts recovered deleted messages that left no doubt. Carter and Lauren Foster had been having an affair for almost 3 months. Their messages included plans to meet that evening on Maple Road, which they referred to as our place. Lauren's last message, sent at 10:36 p.m., read, "He doesn't suspect a thing. Says he's going to bed early. I told him I was working late. I'll be at our place by 11. I can't wait until we can stop hiding." When this information was presented to Daniel Foster during questioning, he, according to the officers present, just sat there with a stone face, staring at one spot. "When did you find out about your wife's affair?" Monroe asked. Foster was silent for a long time, then, ignoring his lawyer's warning gesture, said, 3 weeks ago. She forgot to log out of her email on our home computer. I saw their correspondence." "And what did you do?" "Nothing. I wanted to understand how serious it was. I wanted to give her a chance to tell me herself. But she didn't." "No." Daniel clenched his fists. "Instead, she was looking for an apartment in Portland. She was planning to leave, after everything we'd been through." "And that made you kill her and Jason?" "I didn't kill them." Foster's voice sounded hollow. "I was in East Haven. I went to buy cigarettes to calm down. Then I came home and waited." "Your pickup truck was at the crime scene, Mr. Foster. We found traces of blood in your garage." "That's a mistake. Someone's framing me." Monroe sighed and gathered her papers. "Daniel Foster, you're under arrest on suspicion of the murders of Lauren Foster and Jason Carter." But even as Foster was led away to a cell, the detective couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this case. Too many loose ends, too many questions. Why did Jason, who clearly had a complicated past involving the mysterious Rebecca from Seattle, choose Pine Ridge for a fresh start? Was it just a coincidence? Or was he deliberately seeking out Lauren? And why would Lauren, who seemed happy in her marriage, suddenly decide to throw it all away for a relationship with a man she barely knew? Returning home after midnight, Monroe stopped by Maple Road. Standing in silence at the place where 2 lives had been cut short, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was a much darker and more complicated story behind this crime than simple jealousy on the part of a cuckolded husband. On the 3rd day of the investigation, it rained from early morning. The damp weather seemed to reflect the gloomy mood of the residents of Pine Ridge, who were already beginning to divide into 2 camps. Those who believed Daniel Foster was guilty, and those who considered him a victim of circumstances. Detective Monroe arrived at the police station at 7:30 a.m. and found a folder on her desk that had been delivered by courier from Seattle. The Seattle Police Department had responded to a request for information about Jason Carter and the mysterious Rebecca M. "Now the picture is becoming clearer," Monroe muttered as she looked through the documents. Jason Carter, it turned out, was known in Seattle as Jason Cole. He had changed his last name a year before moving to Pine Ridge. Rebecca Myers was his wife, whom he had officially divorced 2 months before moving. According to police reports, Carter Cole had been charged with domestic violence 3 times, but each time Rebecca had withdrawn her statements. The most disturbing incident occurred 2 years earlier, when Rebecca was hospitalized with a broken jaw and a concussion. At that time, she also refused to press charges, claiming that she had fallen down the stairs. "Look at the photo," Monroe said, handing the picture to Jackson. In the photo, Jason was holding a little girl in his arms, standing next to a frail blonde woman, Rebecca. "Judging by the dates," the detective continued, "their daughter must be about 4 years old now. But the documents indicate that Jason gave up his parental rights during the divorce. There is a noteworthy detail in the hospital discharge summary. After the last incident, Rebecca went to a women's crisis center. So our school gym teacher was a domestic tyrant," Jackson concluded. "But how does that tie in with the Foster case?" "Maybe it's not," Monroe replied thoughtfully. "Or maybe it's directly related. A man with a violent streak, starting a new life with a clean slate, and he chooses a married woman as his target. That doesn't seem like a coincidence." By noon, medical examiner Dr. Hartman presented his final report. Lauren and Jason died between 12:15 and 12:45 a.m. as a result of multiple injuries sustained from being run over by a heavy vehicle. The first impact was not fatal. The victims were still alive when the vehicle ran over them a second time. They died slowly and painfully, the doctor concluded. Judging by the position of the bodies, Jason tried to protect Lauren. His body partially covered her. At 2 p.m., technicians presented their analysis of the phone data cell tower logs confirmed that Daniel's phone was indeed in the East Haven area at the time the camera captured him buying cigarettes. However, there was a 47-minute period between 12:03 a.m. and 12:50 a.m. when his phone was out of range. That's more than enough time to drive to Maple Road, commit the crime, and return, Monroe noted. At the same time, Officer Thompson interviewed residents of houses along the suspected route of Foster's pickup truck. An elderly couple living a mile from the crime scene recalled hearing the sound of a truck passing by with a distinctive screech of brakes at around 12:20 a.m. "That's unusual for the middle of the night," said 78-year-old Harold Simmons. "I woke up to the sound, but I thought someone was lost. That road has hardly been used since the new highway was built." At Foster & Sons Auto Repair, investigators found a computer with GPS tracking software installed. Daniel had used it for a company pickup truck used by employees. However, Foster's personal pickup truck was not listed in the system. By evening, Melissa Harris brought Lauren's personal diary to the station, which she had kept in her locker at the hospital. "I didn't know if I should give this to you," Melissa admitted. "It's so personal, but I think it might help you understand what was going on between them." The diary, started 6 months earlier, was a candid confession of a woman whose marriage was slowly falling apart. Lauren described in detail how, after his second tour of duty, Daniel returned like an empty shell of his former self. April 23rd. Another episode happened today. Dee was screaming in his sleep, then woke up in a cold sweat and didn't recognize me for almost a minute. When I tried to hug him, he pushed me so hard that I hit the dresser. In the morning, he didn't remember anything and didn't believe he could have done such a thing. May 17th. Dee refuses to take his medication. He says it makes him feel like a zombie. I'm afraid to sleep in the same bed with him. Yesterday, I found him sitting in the garage at 3 a.m., just staring at the wall. June 12th. Met a new gym teacher today who brought his class in for a physical, Jason. The first man in a long time who looked at me like a woman, not a nurse or a wife. I caught myself thinking what it would be like to be with someone who didn't carry so much darkness inside. Subsequent entries documented the development of the relationship between Lauren and Jason, which began with innocent conversations in the hospital cafeteria and grew into secret meetings on Maple Road, where they could just be themselves, away from prying eyes. However, entries from the last month showed Lauren's growing anxiety. In one entry dated September 22nd, she wrote, "Today, Jay punched the steering wheel when I said I wasn't ready to leave Dee right now. There was something cold in his eyes that reminded me of Daniel in his worst days. Maybe I'm just trading one cage for another?" The last entry, dated October 15th, the day before the murder, was particularly disturbing. "I've made up my mind tomorrow I'm going to tell Jay that we need to stop seeing each other. I can't just walk away from Dee knowing the state he's in. He won't survive another betrayal. My therapist says he's making progress, and my leaving could cause him to regress. I have to help him get stable first, then think about myself. Jay will be angry, but he has to understand. And if he doesn't, well, that will only confirm my fears that his charm hides the same control I'm trying to escape from." Detective Monroe finished reading the diary and leaned back in her chair, massaging her temples. The picture became more complicated with every new piece of information. "We need to question Foster again," she decided. Daniel looked exhausted after a night in a cell. His lawyer protested against further questioning, but Foster himself insisted on talking. "I want to clear up a few things," he said. "You found Lauren's diary, didn't you?" Monroe nodded, surprised by his insight. "She always kept diaries. She started in high school. Mr. Foster, according to the entries, your wife was planning to end her relationship with Jason Carter on the day of the murder. Did you know that?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "No. All I knew was what I saw in their correspondence, that they were planning to meet on Maple Road." "And that made you follow them?" "I already told you. I didn't kill them." His voice remained calm, but his knuckles were white with tension. "I did drive to Maple Road that evening, but earlier. Around 9:30 p.m., I wanted to see them with my own eyes, to make sure it was real." "And what did you see?" "No one. I waited for half an hour and left." "Where?" "Home first. Then I couldn't calm down, so I drove to East Haven for cigarettes. Everyone knows me in town, and I didn't want them to see me like that. And then, I went back home. I waited for Lauren. Why didn't you mention this trip to Maple Road earlier? Daniel lowered his eyes. Because it looks bad. A jealous husband stalking his wife. But I swear, when I left there, they were alive. I didn't even see them. Your pickup truck was at the crime scene. We found paint chips, tire tracks, and blood in your garage. I don't know how to explain it, Daniel said, showing signs of despair for the first time. The car was in the driveway when I got back from East Haven. I parked both cars on the street, mine and the company car. We used the garage for spare parts. Who else might have had access to your pickup? The keys are usually in the workshop. Any of the workers could have taken them, or someone who knows where we keep them. Monroe made a note. It was the first real lead that could potentially prove Foster's innocence. Meanwhile, Officer Jackson reported on his visit to the Veterans Support Center, where he had spoken with Dr. Warren, Daniel's therapist. He wouldn't go into details, citing doctor-patient confidentiality, Jackson explained. But he did confirm that Foster had been making progress in recent months. He was particularly interested in the fact that Foster's wife was planning to end the affair. He said that contradicted his understanding of the dynamics of their marriage, based on his sessions with Daniel. So Daniel wasn't an abusive tyrant, as one might assume, Monroe clarified. Quite the opposite, according to the doctor. Daniel described his wife as his only ray of light and expressed a constant fear that she would one day see how broken he was and leave him. The doctor was convinced that this fear was what was keeping his PTSD going. By the end of the day, Detective Monroe decided to make a visit she hadn't thought about before. She drove to Seattle to meet Rebecca Myers, Jason Carter Cole's ex-wife. Rebecca lived in a modest apartment in the suburbs of Seattle with her daughter and her mother. She was a thin woman with tired eyes who didn't seem surprised by the police visit. "I've been waiting for this," she said, inviting Monroe into the small living room. "I knew sooner or later he'd do something that would lead you to me." "Did you keep in touch with Jason after the divorce?" "No, we had a restraining order, but I kept tabs on him through social media. I wanted to know where he was so Lily and I could stay away." "Tell me about your relationship." Rebecca took a deep breath. "When we met, he was the most charming man I had ever met. Attentive, caring. But after the wedding, everything started to change. At first, it was little things. Criticizing my clothes, being jealous of my friends. Then he started controlling my finances. And when I got pregnant, the beatings began." "Why didn't you leave?" "It's a classic story. He repented, promised to change. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him. When Lily was born, things were good for almost a year. Then it all came back, only worse. He started saying that I was cheating on him, that Lily might not be his daughter. Delusional accusations. What was the last straw? One day he came home drunk and found out that I was texting a male colleague. He broke my jaw. He said that if I left, he would find me and teach me loyalty. At the hospital, a nurse gave me a brochure for a crisis center. They helped me make an escape plan. Showing Rebecca a photo of Lauren, Monroe asked, "Do you know this woman?" Rebecca shook her head. "But I'm not surprised. Jason always chose a certain type. Caring, empathetic women, the kind who want to save and heal. They're the easiest to control because they don't leave for a long time. They all hope to help. Like you." "Like me," Rebecca confirmed sadly. "What can you say about his relationships with married women? Did he have any experience with that before?" "There was one before me. I found out by accident after we were already married. She was a nurse too, oddly enough. He showed me pictures of her and laughed that he stole her from her loser husband." "What happened to her?" "I don't know. He just said she got what she deserved when she decided to go back to her husband." Rebecca shuddered. It always scared me the way he said it. Returning to Pine Ridge late that evening, Monroe couldn't shake the feeling that the case was taking a very different turn. Perhaps Daniel Foster really wasn't a murderer. Perhaps the real dark story lay in Jason Carter's past. The morning of the fourth day of the investigation began with an unexpected visit for Detective Monroe. When she entered her office, a middle-aged man in a neat suit was waiting at the door. "Detective Monroe? I'm Richard Lang," A private investigator from Portland. I think I have some information that might interest you. Lang opened a leather folder and took out several photographs. They showed Jason Carter leaving a motel with different women. 6 months ago, I was hired by a man from Eugene. He suspected his wife was having an affair with her new gym trainer, Jason Carter. I gathered evidence the case was closed and the client got a divorce. But I was intrigued by this Carter. There was something predatory about him. Monroe looked closely at the photos. Did you start watching him on your own initiative? Call it professional curiosity. I tracked him to Pine Ridge and discovered a new pattern, Lauren Foster. When I heard about the murder, I decided to share what I knew. The most important photo was dated October 10th, just a week before the crime. It showed Jason, his face contorted with rage, grabbing Lauren by the arm in the parking lot of the Pine Grove Motel, 15 miles from Pine Ridge. They were arguing, Lang explained. She was trying to leave, he wouldn't let her. A classic pattern of control that I've seen dozens of times. Monroe immediately requested a warrant to seize the motel's records. By noon, it was clear that Lauren and Jason had met there 5 times in the last 2 months. The last time was on October 10th, the day captured in the photo. Meanwhile, Officer Jackson questioned Foster's auto repair shop employees about access to the pickup truck keys. Mechanic Tony Ramirez confirmed that the keys were usually hung on a board in the office. Anyone could have taken them, he said. Dan never locked the shop from the inside during business hours. And after work, the keys to the pickup truck were usually with him or at home on a hook in the hallway. By 2 p.m., forensic investigators had completed their second search of the Foster's garage. On the garage ceiling, they found a small camera cleverly disguised as a smoke detector. A homemade surveillance system, the technician explained. Battery-powered, records to a memory card. Very simple design, but effective. The memory card contained a recording dated the night of the murder at 12:38 a.m. The video showed a man in a hoodie parking Daniel's pickup truck in the garage. His face was impossible to make out, but his build was clearly different from Foster's large frame. The man wiped the bumper with a rag, then left the garage, leaving the pickup inside. Did Daniel install this camera? Monroe asked as she reviewed the footage. Judging by the fingerprints on the device, yes. And here's what's interesting. Our first team didn't notice the camera during the search. Someone turned it upside down after the initial search. Monroe urgently called Daniel Foster in for another interview. When he was shown the footage, he looked both surprised and relieved. I installed the camera 2 weeks ago when I suspected Lauren of cheating, he explained. But I forgot about it in the commotion after what happened. I haven't watched the footage. Who knew about the camera? No one. I installed it secretly. Couldn't that be you on the tape? In a hoodie, deliberately changing your gait? Look at the timestamp, Daniel replied calmly. 12:38 a.m. At that time, I was at a gas station 3 miles from home, buying coffee. There should be camera footage there. Checking the gas station's records confirmed Foster's story. At 12:36 a.m., he was indeed there, paying for coffee and a sandwich. His alibi for when the pickup truck was returned to the garage was confirmed. By evening, Detective Monroe had another important piece of information, an analysis of Jason Carter's phone calls. The day before the murder, he had called Seattle 3 times to a number registered to a Trevor McKenzie. Running the name through the databases, Monroe discovered that McKenzie was Rebecca Meyer's brother and had a criminal record for assault and illegal possession of a firearm. Monroe called Rebecca to ask about her brother. The woman seemed alarmed by the question. Trevor was very protective of me after what Jason did. He came to the hospital when I was lying there with a broken jaw. He said he'd take care of the problem. I begged him not to do anything, and he promised, but Trevor was always impulsive. When was the last time you spoke to your brother? 3 days ago. He said he was going on a short trip. And before that? Did he mention Jason? Pause. A month ago, he mentioned that Jason was up to his old tricks with a new woman. I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't want to know. A check revealed that Trevor McKenzie had rented a car in Seattle the day before the murder and returned it 2 days later. GPS tracking showed that the car had indeed been in the Pine Ridge area on the night of the crime. The clues began to form a new picture. Monroe gathered her team in the conference room at the police station. "Here's our new theory," she began. Trevor Mackenzie, wanting revenge for his sister, had been following Jason Carter. When he found out about his affair with Lauren Foster, he planned his moment of revenge. On the day of the murder, Trevor arrived in Pine Ridge knowing about Jason and Lauren's meeting. Monroe pointed to the map. He waited for them on Maple Road. He probably planned to attack only Jason, but Lauren witnessed the crime. After the murder, he needed to divert suspicion, and he knew about Foster's auto shop from his surveillance. He broke in, took the keys to the pickup truck, returned to the crime scene, and moved the bodies to stage a crime of passion. But how did he know where Foster kept the keys? Jackson asked. "We're looking into the possibility that he may have been in contact with someone who worked at the garage. He may have introduced himself as a customer or a friend of Daniel's." "What about the garage security camera footage? Was that Mackenzie?" "Highly likely. The height and build match. We're currently tracking his movements after the murder." That evening, Trevor Mackenzie was arrested at the Canadian border. In his luggage, they found a sweatshirt with microscopic traces of Lauren Foster's blood and a tablet with photos of Jason Carter. At 11:15 p.m., Mackenzie was taken to the Pine Ridge police station. After 3 hours of questioning, he confessed to the double murder, but insisted that he had only intended to scare Jason. "I wanted him to feel the fear my sister felt," Mackenzie said. "I wanted to talk to him, maybe scare him, but when I saw him with that woman, he was just like he was with Rebecca, controlling, domineering. They were arguing. He grabbed her arm, shook her. I just snapped." According to Mackenzie's testimony, he hit Jason and Lauren with his rental car while they were standing next to Carter's car. Panicking, he decided to divert suspicion away from himself and onto Lauren's husband. "I had been watching the workshop before, saw where they kept the keys. That night, I took Foster's pickup truck, went back to the spot and finished the job. Then I returned the car to the garage. No one was supposed to get hurt except Carter. It all went wrong." By the morning of the 5th day of the investigation, Daniel Foster was released from custody. Having been the prime suspect for almost 4 days, he looked exhausted but calm. "I knew I didn't kill them," he told reporters waiting outside the police station. "To anyone who thought otherwise, I hold no ill will. In your situation, I probably would have suspected my husband too." When a reporter asked how he felt about his wife after her betrayal, Foster paused for a moment, then replied quietly, "I loved Lauren. Whatever happened between us, she didn't deserve that end. No one does." Closing the case, Detective Monroe was aware of the tragic irony of what had happened. In trying to protect his sister and avenge domestic violence, Trevor Mackenzie became a cold-blooded killer who took 2 lives and destroyed many more. 6 months after Trevor Mackenzie's arrest, life in Pine Ridge gradually returned to normal. The county hospital erected a memorial bench in honor of Lauren Foster, and the high school established the Jason Carter Scholarship for talented athletes, a decision that was met with mixed reactions from those who knew about his true past. It was a cold morning when Detective Sarah Monroe parked outside the county courthouse. Today was the start of the Mackenzie trial, and she had been called to testify. In the courtroom, Monroe met Daniel Foster. He had visibly aged in the past 6 months, with early gray hairs appearing in his dark hair. But his eyes no longer had the emptiness she had seen in the days after the tragedy. "How are you, Mr. Foster?" Monroe asked, shaking his hand. "I'm managing," he replied quietly. "I sold the workshop. I'm starting over in Eugene. I'm working at a service center and seeing a therapist. Dr. Warren says I'm making progress." "I'm glad to hear that." Daniel nodded toward the courtroom. "Do you think he'll get the maximum sentence? Double premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances?" "Almost certainly." The trial began with a statement from District Attorney Michael Bradley. He methodically presented the evidence against Trevor Mackenzie: GPS tracking of a rented car, bloodstains on his clothes, photos of the victim stored on his devices, and finally, his own confession. "This was not a spur-of-the-moment act or a crime of passion," Bradley said. "Mr. Mackenzie spent months stalking Jason Carter. He studied his routine, knew about his relationship with Lauren Foster, and chose the perfect place to attack, a deserted road where witnesses are rare. And then he cold-bloodedly tried to frame an innocent man." Mackenzie's attorney, Janet White, presented a different picture. The story of a brother traumatized by his sister's suffering, and a man whose actions were driven by despair over a system that failed to protect victims of domestic violence. My client saw his sister suffer at the hands of Jason Cole, known in Pine Ridge as Jason Carter. He saw the justice system fail her time and time again. He saw Cole escape the consequences and simply move to a new town to find a new victim. At that moment, a muffled sound rang out in the courtroom. Rebecca Myers, sitting in the back row, was quietly crying. Next to her sat a middle-aged woman, holding her hand tightly. When Detective Monroe was called to testify, she presented a chronology of the investigation, highlighting key moments that helped uncover the truth. She paid particular attention to the hidden camera in Foster's garage. In my opinion, the most disturbing aspect of this case is not only the tragedy of 2 lives lost, but how easily the public and even law enforcement accepted the version of events that Mr. Foster was guilty, Monroe said. We almost convicted an innocent man because of our assumptions about how a jealous husband should behave. During cross-examination, Attorney Mackenzie asked an unexpected question. Detective Monroe, during your investigation, did you find any evidence that Jason Carter or Cole physically threatened Lauren Foster? Monroe hesitated. Mrs. Foster's diary contained entries expressing concern about Mr. Carter's behavior. Private investigator Richard Lang provided a photograph showing Carter aggressively grabbing her arm. And on the night of the murder, according to Mr. Mackenzie's testimony, they had been arguing. And Mrs. Foster was planning to end her relationship with Mr. Carter, correct? Yes, according to her last diary entry. Thank you, Detective. No further questions. After the lunch break, the court heard testimony from Trevor Mackenzie himself. The 41-year-old man looked haggard in his orange prison jumpsuit. His voice was steady, but his hands, clenching the edges of the podium, were visibly shaking. I didn't plan to kill them, he began. When I came to Pine Ridge, I just wanted to talk to Carter, scare him, make him understand that he couldn't just move from town to town, destroying women's lives. Mackenzie described how he had been watching Jason for several months, how he had learned about his relationship with Lauren, and how he had accidentally discovered their secret place on Maple Road. That night, I waited for them there. I saw them arrive in 2 cars. They were standing by Carter's car, arguing. Lauren was crying. Carter grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her, just like he did with Rebecca. Mackenzie's eyes filled with tears. I just lost it. I got in my car and drove straight at them. I just wanted to scare them, but Carter pushed Lauren out of the way and I hit them both. And then? Asked the prosecutor. They were injured but alive. Carter was screaming. Lauren was moaning. I panicked. I realized I was a criminal now, and I decided to shift the suspicion onto Lauren's husband. How exactly did you do that? I knew from my surveillance that Foster owned an auto repair shop. I drove there, broke in. They didn't even have an alarm. I took the keys to his pickup truck, which were hanging on a board. And then you went back and deliberately ran over the victims. Mackenzie lowered his head. Yes, they were still alive. Lauren looked at me. She didn't understand what was happening. A heavy silence hung in the courtroom. A week later, the court handed down its verdict. Trevor Mackenzie was found guilty of double murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was announced, Monroe met Rebecca Myers in the empty courtroom. The woman looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. Did you know about your brother's plans? Monroe asked bluntly. Rebecca shook her head. No, I swear to you, I would never. Trevor has always been a protector. After what Jason did, he said he wanted to teach him a lesson. But I thought it was just words. Are you in contact with your brother? Yes, he's my brother, no matter what. What he did is terrible. But I understand why he snapped. Monroe nodded. And the woman who was with you in court? Sandra, my partner. She works as a counselor at the crisis center where I used to be a client. She helped me get my life back. I'm glad you have support, Monroe said sincerely. A month after the trial, Detective Monroe received an invitation to the opening of a new wing at Pine Ridge City Hospital, named after Lauren Foster. At the ceremony, she met Daniel, who had come from Eugene especially for the event. It's hard to come back here, he admitted when they were alone, but I had to come, for Lauren. How's life in Eugene? It's getting better. You know what's hardest? Not just losing Lauren, but realizing that our marriage was already broken and I didn't see it, or didn't want to see it. PTSD makes it difficult to perceive reality, Monroe said gently. Yes, and Lauren, she tried to help me. Even when she decided to leave, she wanted to do it in a way that wouldn't interfere with my treatment. She cared about me until the very end. What about Carter? Did you blame him? Daniel took a deep breath. At first, yes, definitely. But then I read Lauren's diary, learned about his true nature, and realized he was just another link in a chain of pain. He hurt his ex-wife, she suffered, her brother wanted revenge, and the cycle continued. We were all, in a sense, part of that tragedy. A year after the events on Maple Road, the town of Pine Ridge appeared to have returned to its peaceful existence. A new owner renamed Foster's Auto Repair Shop. A new nurse replaced Lauren at the hospital. A new gym teacher coached the basketball team at the school, but deep scars remained. Maple Road was nicknamed Grief Road by the locals, and many avoided it, even if it meant a few extra minutes on their commute. Parents checked on their children more often, spouses became more attentive to each other, and the local crisis center reported an increase in calls from victims of domestic violence. Women inspired by Lauren's story found the courage to seek help. Detective Monroe often thought about the case that had become the most difficult of her career, about how close they had come to convicting an innocent man, about how personal trauma can lead to new tragedies, and about how sometimes the simplest explanations, a jealous husband killed his cheating wife, hide much darker and more complicated stories. In her last interview with a local newspaper, she said, "This case reminded me that behind every crime there is a human story. Often we look for monsters, but we find people driven to despair by their fears, pain, and desperation. That doesn't excuse their actions, but it helps us understand how to prevent similar tragedies in the future." The epilogue to the Foster Carter case was not a happy one. There are no happy epilogues in stories where human lives are cut short. But it brought a sense of closure and perhaps served as a warning about how closely our lives are intertwined and how unpredictable the consequences of our actions can be. Trevor McKenzie is serving his life sentence in a state prison. Rebecca Myers moved to another state with her daughter and partner to start a new life. Daniel Foster is slowly rebuilding his life in Eugene, working at an auto repair shop and continuing treatment for PTSD. And Sarah Monroe continues to serve as a detective in Pine Ridge, hoping she'll never have to deal with a case like that again, but knowing that if she does, she'll be ready to dig deeper than the surface and find the real truth, no matter how uncomfortable or unexpected it may be.